I've spent years looking for one bird. I've been on 16 boat rides, had to charter 3 of those. Some were canceled last minute, and some reports weren't even real. If you're new to this channel, I'm Doug Hitchcox, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the birds that elude us. Not just the ones that we miss on a trip, but the ones we just can't seem to find despite the effort. The ones birders call Nemesis birds. A Nemesis bird is just that, one that you've tried to see with some significant effort and just can't find. More specifically, that significant effort generally means that there have been many failed attempts. Sure, you can dip on a rarity chase, another birder slang for not seeing a bird you've traveled for, but I think most birders would agree that a bird doesn't just become a nemesis until you've tried several times and still haven't found it. Another aspect of a nemesis bird is that there are probably only one species, maybe two, that truly achieve this status for you. There may be a few birds you've been unlucky with, but I'll bet that there's one that really sticks out as a true nemesis. I missed a ferruginous hawk by about 20 minutes last year, then spent 3 days looking for it, unsuccessfully. That was a good bit of effort, but I wouldn't call it a nemesis. In the summer, I've been lucky to help with one of National Audubon's Hog Island teen camp called Mountains to Sea, where we take a dozen teenagers birding for a week, half the time at Maine Audubon's Borestone Mountain, and the other half at Hog Island. We have different targets in various habitats we go to, but we don't get all of them. I mention this because I got a kick out of some of the kids immediately declaring a missed bird, like ruffed grouse, as a nemesis. So as much as we may try to define what a nemesis bird is, I think it's all relative, and your own nemesis can be whatever you want. It was just funny for me to be talking with them about my nemesis, which I'd been chasing since almost before they were born. Sometimes they aren't even the rarest birds, which might actually compound the feelings that makes them a nemesis. I can't help but think of my buddy Nick Lund, who you might know of as the birdist, and his nemesis, the Connecticut warbler. He is on record as saying this is the year that he sees Connecticut warbler, except this being the year every year for at least 8 years. And that is a fun part of birding. Usually with enough effort you get to see your target, but then there is the fact that birding requires a lot of luck. Nothing beats time in the field. You can go back to my first video on how to find rare birds for a deeper dive on that topic, but even the best birders can't find every bird. There is the funny question of would birding still be fun if you saw your target every time, and yeah, I think it would be a blast. One metaphor I like thinking of with nemesis birds is liking it to Moby Dick and Captain Ahab's desire to catch his white whale. This drive is sometimes referred to as a monomania, at least in 19th century psychiatry, as a form of partial insanity conceived as a single psychological obsession in an otherwise sound mind. I'll out myself here by acknowledging my own problems with rarities and this need to pursue a nemesis bird. A few years ago, there was a redwing, the European thrush, not the New World blackbird, found in Maine, and Kevin Nguyen at The Verge, which covers tech news, wrote a fun article about the bird, the technology behind rarity reports, and a bit of a love story tying it all together in 2022. I'll link this into the description, but one of my quotes that gets back to the strange motivation, whatever the psychological explanation is if there's a rare bird in Maine and I'm not looking at it, I'm just miserable until then. And I point this out because that is, to me, a big part of these nemesis birds. We get these strong emotions for a single rare sighting, the highs of when it's reported, and especially if you see it, but the real lows when you don't. And when you have repeated exposure to those emotions coming from the same bird, then it becomes a true nemesis. I've had a few nemesis birds over the years, but as I mentioned earlier, I have one that has driven me as mad as Captain Ahab. It is a Tufted Puffin. I live in Maine, the only state in the US with nesting Atlantic puffins, which as their name suggests are the only puffin in the Atlantic Ocean, or they should be. If you go to the North Pacific, you can find a couple other species of puffins, horned and tufted. Well, in the summer of 2014, a tufted puffin was found at Machias Seal Island. This location is famous amongst bird photographers as the only site in the US that you can land on the island and get to sit in a blind and photograph puffins. I should clarify that it is technically disputed territory between the US and Canada. The Canadians fly a flag on the island, but if you submit an eBird list, it counts for a US list, so I'd call that a win for us. There's only one boat that goes out to Machias Seal Island, and those tickets to land and sit with the puffins usually sell out in a matter of minutes each spring. The bird was being seen on and off, and despite not being able to land, a few of us decided to charter the boat one afternoon to take us out and see if we could spot the bird from the water. A private charter is always going to be expensive, but being able to split it between a group helps. But after a 4-hour drive, 3 hours in the boat, and $300 on the charter, I had my first miss of the tufted puffin. Amazingly, this isn't Maine's first record of a tufted puffin. There's one that goes all the way back to 1832 and might be one of the most famous tufted puffins ever, as it is depicted by John James Audubon in his famous work, The Birds of America. The specimen that he painted is noted as being collected at the mouth of the Kennebec River in the winter of 1832 by Hunter on an ice floe. That specimen is currently in the Maine State Museum's collection. There is a little skepticism about the accuracy of that record, since Audubon would buy specimens from hunters who had traveled all over, and it is possible that labels had been swapped. It certainly wouldn't be the only time that he got something wrong, like this, or this, or this, but it's generally accepted as a valid record. The mystery of Audubon's bird aside, the occurrence of the recent tufted puffin in the Atlantic is remarkable, and left a lot of us wondering how it could even happen. There are other Pacific alcids that are known to wander east. An ancient murrelet was also photographed at Machias Seal Island in 2017, but those species are known to move more over land. Looking at an eBird map of ancient murrelet records, you can see this dispersal, and it actually forms a gradient radiating from their core range. Puffins aren't capable of these overland movements, which is why we so rarely see inland records. Even in Maine, they are rarely blown inland, and if so, only associated with a strong storm, like Aroostook County's only record being found after Hurricane Fiona. The more logical explanation is that with decreased ice in the Arctic, a passage is opening, allowing the flow of species between the Pacific and Atlantic, where they were historically locked in their respective oceans. Along with the tufted puffin making it to Maine, another great example going the other way is the northern gannet dazzling birders in California. Again, a species that is incapable of such dispersal over land, but could easily make that northerly trip. I'll get back to the Maine bird in a second, but think it is worth pointing out a couple other records of tufted puffin in the Atlantic, especially on the west side of Greenland. One photographed in 2009 near Davis Strait is pretty remarkable, and there's one from Dalrympe Rock, in 2019. What is really amazing about that list is that it also has a horned puffin on it. All 3 puffins on one checklist. That horned puffin had been around the Atlantic puffin colony during the summers of 2002 to 2006 and 2013 to 2019. It is also worth pointing out that the Western Palearctic also has 2 records of tufted puffins from 1994 and 2009. And while we do know puffins can be long-lived, I think it is more likely that we've seen more than one tufted puffin make it to the Atlantic Ocean in the last 30 years. Speaking of old puffins returning, if we jump to 2022, the tufted puffin was back in the Gulf of Maine, found on Petite Manans National Wildlife Refuge. Unlike in 2014 when it was only seen around Machias Seal Island, in 2022 the tufted hopped around various seabird nesting islands in the Gulf of Maine, going from Petite Manans north to Machias Seal Island a week later. A week after that it was seen at Seal Island National Wildlife Refuge for just a couple days. Then another week later, it made an appearance at Eastern Egg Rock. Eastern Egg Rock is perhaps one of the best known sites for seeing puffins, being the southernmost nesting colony and having at least 3 ferries a day going to it. I'm sure it is how most birders get Atlantic puffin for their ABA list, and in fact, why don't you hit that like button if that's true for you? I chartered a trip out of Millbridge on June 23rd, and despite the tufted being seen on Petite Manans that morning, it was gone by the time we made it to the island. I did also take 3 trips to Eastern Egg Rock that summer. 2 were on work time, so that didn't cost me anything, but still, no tufted puffin for my main list. 2023, the puffin was back again, this time being found almost a month earlier than the previous early date, June 7th, back at Petite Manans. It would bounce around a lot, hitting Matinicus Rock the next day, disappearing for 3 weeks before showing up at Eastern Egg Rock, then back to Matinicus in early July. Random sightings around Eastern Egg Rock, and the last record of the year was back at Petite Manans on July 31st. This was about when I started losing faith that I'd ever see the bird, and I was ready to accept that fate. I only went out 3 times, twice to Eastern Egg Rock and once to Petite Manans. 2024 was unique in that the tufted puffin's return was even earlier, first sighted on May 23rd, back at Matinicus Rock, and this ended up being the only sighting of the year. But hey, I was over it. Now here we are in 2025, and right on schedule, the Tufted Puffin shows up on May 22nd. Remarkably, that first report was from the mainland. That day there was an onshore wind, and Alex Lamoureux had posted on one of the local group me's that there was great conditions for sea watching at Dyer Point and Cape Elizabeth. So a handful of birders go down, including Noah Gibb and Stacey Huth, who are doing a main big year. As you may have guessed, Noah and Stacey spotted the tufted flying north, but unfortunately Alex had left due to a prior obligation. That sucks, but even worse is that a third birder that was on site thought Noah and Stacey were kidding when they called out the puffin flying by. By the time that person realized it wasn't a joke, the tufted was long gone. And it was apparently on its way to its favorite haunts because a few days later it was found on Eastern Egg Rock. Now I'll spare you the details of every movement, but the bird basically ping-ponged from Eastern Egg to Matinicus for 2 months, with the occasional stop at Seal Island and Petite Manan. Whatever spark had gone out in me in prior years, it was reignited, and this had to be the year to see the bird. At first it seemed like it would be easy, given how reliably the bird was being seen at Eastern Egg Rock, so on June 2nd a few of us went out, but we missed it. And here's when the annoyance, or really the building dread, starts, because after we missed it, other people kept seeing it. So I tried again on June 9th, and on June 16th, and on June 19th, and on June 23rd, and on June 27th, and July 2nd. On all those trips, I went out with Louis Bevier, who is right behind me on the total main list, and that is one of the fun things about birding. Unlike some competitive events, we just want to see as many species as we each can, so we work with each other on seeing them. An interesting side story came with some suspicious reports of the tufted puffin. I say suspicious because it looked a little odd, a little like a decoy. The Seabird Institute researchers on Eastern Egg Rock decided they were going to try catching the tufted puffin to put a transmitter on it and hopefully learn where it goes. Unfortunately, this hadn't been shared with any birders, who from a rocking boat were mistaking the decoy for the real thing. Even more unfortunate, this hadn't even been shared with the Audubon naturalists working on the boat, so even they were pointing out the decoy to passengers. The decoy was eventually moved, but there were some understandably upset birders after that one. After another sighting of the actual bird, on July 16th, Lewis and I decided we'd try again the next day and bought tickets out of Port Clyde. I had to lead a bird walk in southern Maine that morning, so raced from Falmouth north on Route 1, passing through Wiscasset, which has some of the worst traffic in the state during the summer thanks to one lobster shack. At 10:01, I get a call from the boat line that they're canceling the trip because the fog is so thick that they don't think it's worth going. I turn back south, Lewis goes north, and to add insult to injury, at 10:13, the bird is reported on the island by one of the researchers living there. This was definitely my turning to the dark side moment. Fear of missing the bird turning to anger the trip was canceled. There were tickets on the New Harbor boat, but those sold out literally as I was trying to buy one on the side of Route 1. Now anger into hate. And yeah, I'm 5 years and thousands of dollars sunk chasing one bird. That is hate into suffering. As luck would have it, 20 minutes later, a post pops up on the state GroupMe that someone must have canceled their trip because there is one ticket available on the New Harbor boat. In the safest way possible, I bought the ticket immediately. Pro tip, using Apple Pay makes it so you don't have to fill out those silly forms that apparently let people check out faster than you. Well, long story short, I make it to New Harbor with about 10 minutes to spare before the boat leaves. It is pea soup fog the entire trip there, and only portions of the island are even visible at a time. But sure enough, through the fog, there was the black belly of a tufted puffin. There were another half dozen serious birders on board, and luckily everyone got to see it. On that morning's wild roller coaster of emotions, it was funny to switch from the joy of seeing the bird and the relief of not needing to chase it again, to actually feeling bad because Lewis wasn't able to make it. I felt worse for seeing it without him than I did good for getting it myself. I hope I never have a bigger nemesis than this tufted puffin, at least one that doesn't take as much effort to see. But as ridiculous as all this is, I do want to say, in defense of having a nemesis bird, is that they're a great motivator. I went out on so many more trips with a bunch of good friends on days that I'd probably have sat around at home. All as a part of this fun hobby and trying to see more birds. And as you know by now, my goal is to get the most people to see the most birds. And you can help me by liking this video, subscribing to this channel, And leave a comment with what your current Nemesis bird is, or one you recently vanquished. And as always, thank you for watching.